So I definitely did notice in that first 5-minute red pill video that I did on the secret space program that the question was about how to red pill somebody in 5 minutes, but the video definitely was not 5 minutes long. It was like 15 minutes long, and I'm like, I know people are gonna say something about it, but I didn't care. I uploaded it anyway, and people definitely did say something about it. But I thought about it, and I think I do want to do these videos in 5 minutes. And the next topic I'm gonna do it on is chemtrails. This was a comment on the last video I uploaded that people really wanted to see, so I'm gonna do this one on chemtrails. And I got the timer ready. Of course, we're gonna start it after this intro, as to not waste time, so let's go. Alright guys, so if you have 5 minutes in everyday conversation and you want to slip in some red pills on the chemtrails subject, I got a couple suggestions on how to do that. Number one, you want to specify the terminology, right? Because we often call these chemtrails, these things that are being laid from planes going across the sky that stay there all day. We term it as chemtrails. We heard it termed even in the mainstream media when they're trying to debunk and ridicule the issue. Yeah, chemtrails, chemtrails. But if you specify the terminology and you let the person know that it's not technically chemtrails, it's actually called geoengineering or solar radiation management, SRM, and you can specify those things to the person and actually give legitimacy to the issue. Now, when they think of the topic, they're not going to think in terms of chemtrails, they're going to think in terms of geoengineering, which is what it's actually called by the NOAA, by NASA, and by various government agencies. So not only are you giving legitimacy to the issue, but when they go and do their own research on it, they're going to type in these words, not that word, and thus they're going to get much different, much more legitimate, even mainstream information that doesn't ridicule or talk down on the topic like typing in chemtrails would. So that would be number one. Number one thing to do when you're trying to waken somebody up to this issue. Number two, point out the obvious. So a few things that are just blatantly obvious with this topic that I don't know how goes over some people's heads. Chemtrails over our heads, haha, get it? Number one, dissipating and lasting chemtrails. So you can find examples with pictures on the internet or even during many days that chemtrails are being laid, that there is a much bigger difference than a contrail and a actual lasting chemtrail that is laid. You'll see the contrail, one that's actually a contrail, dissipate behind the jet up in the sky like 500 to 1,000 feet behind the craft. However long it stays, it'll dissipate within like 2 to 3 seconds. And you can see this quite often, and you still see it now. And like I said, you can find pictures of it that are actually contrails. Now let's talk about the lasting trails, the chemtrails or the geoengineering trails. Those suckers last all day, man. They'll go over like, late morning usually. Usually they'll get a nice sunrise, and then mid-late morning they'll start going over. And one will go, two will go, three will go. And those things last all day. They spread out along the sky. They start getting wispy, and then you just get this like incessant cloud cover. And you're like, how the heck, if that's supposed to be water vapor up there, why is that lasting all day long, right? So point that out, how obvious that is that you can see two completely different kinds of trails, even on the same day, even sometimes at the same time. You can see a contrail over there and then a plane actually dumping a trail right over there in the sky. This one here, how come on some days we get completely sunny blue skies all day long, and it doesn't end up that you get some trails over that create clouds later in the day. I'm talking blue skies from sunrise to sunset, and then some days it's completely covered. Like I said, you just get like the grid pattern that goes over. That's the thing you can point out as well, grid pattern. How the heck is that natural or, not purposeful? But you get that grid pattern that goes over and then just covers it. And of course, they'll say, oh, maybe it was due to the humidity or the temperature or whatever excuse they throw out there in the air that made those trails not stick and stay into long-lasting trails. But the thing is, I notice this any day, any time of year, any temperature, any humidity. Not only when it's dry out, but when it's humid and wet out, or on winter days or summer days. Some winter days you get completely blue skies all day. Some summer days you get completely blue skies all day. Some winter skies, you'll get chemtrails covering the place. Some summer skies, you'll get chemtrails covering the place. So it's differing all year, but it's the same thing in that some days are sunny, some days are covered. And then this one right here, skies decades ago. So this one is one that a lot of the older generation tends to vibe with because they actually have memories of decades ago, but they often say, you know, what the heck were, you know, skies back then? I remember these blue skies, never a trail in the sky, and then over the past few decades, it's just become more prevalent, and funny enough, different parts of the world even. You know, if you're typically in a Western city or a Western country, you'll see a lot more chemtrails than you will if you go to, say, a 5-minute alarm, but I'm going to keep going. I'm almost done. Say if you go to a third world country or just some place that's far more remote, you don't really even see the chemtrails. So that's something to point out as well. It's some days you see them, some days you don't. Times they dissipate, sometimes they don't. So it's just these little inconsistencies, the obvious discrepancies that you can point out to people that'll hopefully stick. And then number 3, quickly here, the issue is discussed in the mainstream. A lot of people think this is just made up. This is some made up theory that geoengineering doesn't exist. But you know, just point out the fact that this has been talked about in the mainstream and by governmental sources for a long time, and especially recently. You can point out a quick YouTube video, send somebody the link, or just say, hey, go check out former CIA Director John Brennan. Interesting individual there. Former CIA Director John Brennan and his speech to the Council on Foreign Relations. I believe this was at the end of 2016, if I remember correctly. It was fairly recently in the scheme of things, like a year or two ago. But anyway, he was addressing the Council on Foreign Relations, and he had a big talk on geoengineering, solar radiation management, right there, and you can watch the video about it on YouTube. And then this one, the actual term and the concept, geoengineering, getting articles in mainstream media outlets. I've seen this happen more and more over the past few months, especially in that the topic of geoengineering is discussed, and it's discussed in a way that's trying to normalize it to the people. But these articles are showing up in The Guardian and The Washington Post, and actually big, I don't want to call them legitimate, but actual corporate media propaganda outlets. And of course they're showing up for different reasons, trying to normalize it, trying to make us think it's normal, trying to make us think we need it to combat climate change or global warming or whatnot. But the fact that it's discussed simply brings legitimacy to it, and the fact that we've got some pretty high officials out there talking about it seriously as well. So those are a few things you can do to help red pill somebody on the chemtrail or geoengineering subject. Bring some legitimacy to the issue by specifying terminology that'll make you look better, and that'll make their researching more effective and efficient for awakening them. Point out the obvious, the things that people should be observant enough to notice, but unfortunately they aren't. You can help them with that. And then number 3, tell them how this is talked about in the mainstream. It's not some made up theory. That's it. That's all for you guys. Let me know in the comments down below what topics you want me to do this on next. These are pretty fun to do, and they require some good mental work for me to try to do it as quick as I can. Not 5 minutes, but I'm sure I'll get these to be one of these days. Peace.